This is the greatest financial experiment in human history, and most people don't even realize they're living inside of it. Global debt, public, private, corporate, and household, has exploded to levels no civilization has ever survived before. Governments borrow trillions with a signature. Central banks create money from nothing. Families sign 30-year loans as if they were ordering dinner. We treat debt as if it were normal, harmless, permanent, but it isn't. Debt has always been a weapon, a tool of power and control, and every system built on it eventually reaches the same breaking point. The question isn't if our debt-driven world will face a reckoning. It's when, and who will pay when the illusion shatters. To understand how we got here, we have to go back to the very beginning of civilization. The first written words weren't stories or philosophy. They were records of debt. On clay tablets in ancient Mesopotamia, people tracked who owed grain, livestock, or silver. Debt was sacred, overseen by priests and kings. And every so often, they declared a jubilee, a complete erasure of debt, to prevent society from imploding. Even 5,000 years ago, rulers understood what modern leaders forget. You cannot enslave an entire population with promises they can never repay. Push too far, and the system collapses. Fast forward to the Renaissance. Debt became sophisticated and dangerous. In Florence, powerful banking families like the Medici turned credit into empire. Kings, popes, and merchants borrowed vast sums to build cathedrals and wage wars. Debt had evolved from survival to ambition. But even gold couldn't save reckless borrowers. Spain, rich with silver from the New World, went bankrupt 4 times in the 1500s. That's the first great truth about debt. It builds civilizations and destroys them. By the 20th century, debt had become global. After World War I, the world was drowning in obligations. Germany was forced to pay massive reparations under the Treaty of Versailles. Debts so crushing that economists warned they would break the country. They did. By 1923, German citizens carried wheelbarrows of paper marks to buy bread. Hyperinflation destroyed the middle class, paved the way for chaos and ultimately, another world war. Debt wasn't just an economic problem anymore, it was political dynamite. In 1944, as World War II ended, world leaders met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to rebuild the global system. The United States, holding 2/3 of the world's gold, wrote the rules. The dollar became the anchor, convertible to gold at $35 an ounce. For a time, it worked. Stability, trade, and growth flourished. But debt is temptation. By the 1960s, America was spending heavily on Vietnam and social programs, printing more dollars than it had gold to back them. Foreign nations began calling in their gold. And in 1971, President Richard Nixon made a fateful decision. He closed the gold window. The dollar was no longer backed by anything tangible. And with that single act, money became infinite, and debt limitless. What followed was the quiet revolution of finance. Without gold, governments could borrow and print at will. Central banks learned to manipulate interest rates, turning money itself into a lever of control. When economies slowed, they cut rates to spark borrowing. When crises hit, they flooded the system with liquidity. Every rescue created more debt than the last. In the 1980s, Reagan and Thatcher expanded borrowing to fuel growth. Developing nations took massive loans from Western banks, and when they couldn't pay, the Latin American debt crisis erupted. It was the new global formula. Use debt to chase prosperity, then borrow even more to survive the fallout. By 2008, the system had turned into a pyramid of leverage, debt stacked on top of debt. Mortgages were packaged into securities, sold to investors, insured with derivatives, and multiplied through 30-to-1 leverage. When one corner crumbled, the whole tower shook. Banks collapsed. Markets froze. Governments stepped in, creating trillions in new debt to save the very system that caused the disaster. The reckless Almaki were rescued. The responsible paid the price. And the world learned the wrong lesson. That debt can always be fixed with more debt. Since that crisis, debt hasn't just grown, it's exploded. By 2023, total global debt passed 300 trillion, nearly 4 times the size of the world economy. Governments, corporations, households, all addicted. Japan's public debt sits above 250% of GDP. The United States borrows trillions every year, barely pretending to care. Even China's miracle growth is built on invisible local government debt, trillions hidden in the shadows. Debt has become invisible, woven into everything. When you swipe a credit card, you're borrowing. When your government runs a deficit, it borrows in your name. Even corporate profits are often fueled by borrowed money used to buy back shares. The whole system floats on promises, and the gravity of reality is waiting. Politicians love debt because it buys time. Raising taxes loses votes. Cutting spending loses elections. Borrowing feels painless, until it isn't. When inflation surged after 2022 and central banks raised rates, the illusion cracked. Suddenly, the cost of servicing all that debt skyrocketed. Governments faced shrinking budgets. Families faced rising mortgage payments, corporations faced refinancing cliffs. Debt is like a sleeping predator, harmless while it rests, deadly when it wakes. So what happens when the world owes more than it can ever repay? History offers only 3 outcomes. You pay it back honestly, which almost never happens. You inflate it away, devaluing the money so the debt shrinks in real terms. Or you default, admitting the system broke. Inflation is the path most governments choose. It's the quietest way to rob the public. When prices rise, your savings lose value, but the government's debt quietly melts away. It's a hidden tax, and it's already happening. But debt isn't just economics, it's power. It decides who rules, who suffers, and who gets rescued when everything collapses. When banks fail, they're bailed out. When corporations overborrow, they restructure. When politicians mismanage, they retire. Ordinary people? They lose their homes, their jobs, their futures. Debt is how power hides, transferring risk upward and pain downward. So what can we do? First, see the system for what it is. A cycle as old as civilization. Debt builds, debt breaks, and the world resets. Second, understand the pattern. No empire, no economy has escaped the reckoning. From Mesopotamia to Rome, from Spain to America, that story never changes. And third, protect yourself. That doesn't mean panic, it means clarity. Build wealth that isn't dependent on the promises of others. Hold knowledge that outlasts currency. See through the illusion before it breaks again. Because history always repeats, especially when it's profitable. Global debt isn't just a statistic, it's a mirror, reflecting every empire's greatest flaw. The belief that tomorrow will always pay for today. But tomorrow always arrives, and when it does, the bill comes due.